Andor is over, and boy did it stick the landing. Welcome back to Movies Good, Internet Bad. I'm Corey, that's Shane, and we're talking about the final 3 episodes of the majestic, illustrious, beautiful Andor. Shane, let's just cut to the chase, man. Let's react to this thing. How'd you feel about these final 3 episodes?
Tony Gilroy is a cruel man. And oh my God, man. I mean, spoilers, obviously, but the way that they ended that series was
Yeah,
the most cruel thing you could possibly do. I mean, we know the fate of Cassian Andor, which is that he ultimately dies. And so,
right.
sure, let's give him a kid. You
Yeah.
bastard.
I think Daddy Andor is the appropriate term to use here, man.
Oh, man.
So Tony Gilroy is a sneaky bastard, and here's why. The entire lead up to the second season, even going back like a year and a half ago, Tony Gilroy has always said, "Oh yeah, the final shot is going to be Cassian walking to Kafrene,"
Yep.
and that was a lie.
Yeah. When I saw B at the end, I was like, "Oh, it's B, and he must be with." Oh no, it's Bix. And then
Yeah,
she was holding something. I was like, "They would not do
yeah,
that,
they
would
they
they?"
did.
They
They
did.
did.
Oh,
So let's start the theories. Who is it? Is it Poe Dameron? Is that what we're talking about here? I know Oscar
it's
Isaac and Diego Luna are good friends in real life, so
it's actually Ray Palpatine.
oh man.
they're,
So
they're gonna retcon. They retcon the Last Jedi, then they retcon the Rise of Skywalker. Now it is Ray Andor.
Ray Andor, who are you? Nobody. Andor translates to nobody. Um, so I was a little bit nervous going into these 3 episodes because you have to tie it to Rogue One, right? And
Mhm.
when you have to do something like that, sometimes it can feel a little heavy-handed or forced or whatever. This was about as organic as something like that could have been, in my opinion, at least. Bringing in the K2SO stuff where there's a little bit of humor injected into things.
Mhm.
All the X-wing pilots, all the stuff on Yavin, Mon Mothma with her white outfit and the haircut.
Her pixie
Like
cut, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I, I, I loved every second of it. I didn't want it to end. It felt like a ticking clock in the back of my head was like, you've only got an hour and a half left of this show, and
Yes.
man, when those final credits hit, not only with the wallop of finding out that Cassian has a kid, but
Uh,
just when it's just over, and it's like, God, where do we go from here, man? I don't know.
yeah, it's going to be really tough to watch any other Star Wars after that because nothing will have that emotional weight. I actually just watched Rogue One before this, and so I was
Okay,
prepared for all of the references and stuff, but now I almost wish I hadn't because I
yeah.
think if I watched Rogue One again after that with that final shot with Bix, I would just start bawling. I watched it on an airplane because clearly I'm out of town without my setup. But I would have started crying on that airplane had I
Yeah.
seen this beforehand.
We're watching it tomorrow, and I'm
No,
not
you're not
emotionally
ready.
ready, man.
You're not ready.
uh,
Oh
Star
man.
Star Wars has always been about fathers and sons, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning, and to tie it back in like that, I like to use the phrase "nasty work" often.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
is nasty work. Cassian's final words to Jin on the beach before they both die is, "Your father would have been proud."
Mm-hmm.
It's like a dad thing to say, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a dad who doesn't. Damn, like oh
Yeah, and that's it's interesting because we get a lot of these, you know, parental connections, and so we
mhm.
got the Luthen connection here. We never really knew what the relationship between Luthen and Clea was, but we get the origin story of them, which is actually very similar to
Mhm.
Cassian Andor's origin story, where
Yeah,
he's a lone child and he's picked up by it's Marva in his
mhm.
story, and of course it's
On a ship.
Luthen in hers. Yeah, and having that very similar backstory, and now this kind of makes me think that that's the Jin and Cassian storyline too. A little bit is like a I wasn't sure if in Rogue One it was more meant to be romantic or not, and now I kind of see it as more like father daughter type of dynamic, and maybe that's how it's meant to be read now going forward.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
The hug in the elevator is the only thing that makes me go,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
But that could just be, like a holy shit, we did it type moment. But
yeah. It's
I don't know.
hard to know, and ultimately, I don't think it really matters. But uh, yeah, we got so much good stuff this week, and
Yeah,
what I found interesting is that the final episode was very slow. Like it was very
extremely.
like
Yeah,
not a lot happened. It's just setting the pieces up for what ultimately happens in Rogue One, and I thought it was fine. It kind of felt like the finale of most of Game of Thrones, where the
yeah,
big event happens in the pre-finale and then the finale is more setting the pieces for the next story. And that's
yeah.
what this felt like to me. It wasn't a big explosive finale. It was getting everybody in the right spot for Rogue One. And what I
Mhm.
thought was also interesting is they left a lot of characters alive
They
so
did.
that if you wanted to branch off from this story and tell more stories with these characters, you absolutely could.
Hmm.
I don't know who ultimately would do that. I don't know what the plan at Lucasfilm is for this
Did they?
Andor verse. No,
Does
that's
Lucasfilm
true.
know the plan? I don't think
Yes,
so.
that's true. I don't know how the Andor verse will continue, but there's a lot of good characters that stayed around, and in theory, you could tell a lot of stories in the original trilogy timeline with
Yeah,
these characters.
yeah. I think it's fascinating because the time between 3 and 4 is the thickest part of the canon in regards to how much stuff has been made in that
Yeah,
part of the timeline, and yet they found a way to cut right through all of that and just
yeah,
make the absolute best thing that they could have made. I was kind of laughing on the inside because in our Last of Us video that we did over the weekend, check that out if you're watching that show, subscribe. We talked about how doing a flashback episode towards the end of a season is a bad
yes,
idea. And
yep,
then this show came along and was like, no, no, if you do it well,
yeah.
it's a great idea and it works fantastically. And
And I think what was important here too is that it was cross cut. It
yeah,
was you were getting a progression of the story in the current day while also
mhm,
finding out the backstory in the past. And I did not expect them to have a full Luthen and Clea episode.
me
Like
either.
we don't see any other characters in that entire first episode. It's
Nope.
just Luthen and Clea. I mean, some of the ISB and stuff like that, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like it's just that storyline. Which is great. Like he was such a pivotal character, and I love that they left his legacy in a good place. Like he
Hmm.
is the reason why they ultimately destroyed the Death Star. All of his work, all of the horrible stuff that he did, he is burning his life to for a sunrise that he'll never
I'll
see,
never
and
see. Yeah.
ultimately that's exactly what happens, right? He
Yeah, man.
knew his ending. He spoke his ending in that famous monologue, and we got it. Uh, Tragic. But I loved his little showdown with Dedra,
Oh
and
my
their
God.
little dual meaning, where he says there's only two pieces of questionable provenance in
Hmm.
this shop, and he's talking
Yep.
about them too,
The two of them.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And I love the callbacks to season one in this. We get the Imperial Star Path
The Star
unit,
Path. Yeah.
which right when she brings that out, he knows he's been had. Like
Yep.
she's got him. Uh, and we got Nemec's manifesto
Oh,
callback, which
that was when the waterworks started for me.
yeah,
That
Partagaz is
God
listening to it
damn it.
later.
How
Uh,
so? How do they get their hands on the manifesto? That
I'm
that was
not
my
sure.
question.
I'm not sure, and maybe it was just from their comms or something like that, and
Yeah.
raiding the safe house and raiding the what do you call it? Their antique
Oh,
shop, and
yeah,
probably had
yeah,
it
yeah,
there, and the ship and stuff like that.
yeah. I
Uh,
just I love that though because Nemec is a character who's in only 3 episodes out of the 24 episodes of this
mhm,
show, and his manifesto had so much weight to it that they played it at the end of season 1, and it hit like
mhm,
a ton of bricks. And then they played it again at the end of season 2, and an Imperial is listening to it, and it still hit
yep,
like a ton of bricks. And then that Imperial shoots himself
kills
in the
himself.
head and kills
Yep,
himself
yep,
because he knows how bad the Empire is, and he knows that his future, because of everything that happened, is going to be worse than dying, which
yeah.
is good God.
Yeah,
Oh,
it all of this was so flawlessly executed. One thing I did think was funny was they talked about bridging gaps between this and Rogue One, And they even had a de-aged Skeleton Stellan Skarsgård
Yeah,
in this episode, which is like, Rogue One, for all of its faults and positives. The worst thing about that movie is the damn de-aged Tarkin throughout the entire thing. And so I thought it was just so funny to be like, you know what, we're going full Rogue One, and we're going to put a de-aged Skarsgård in here.
However, I thought it looked pretty good.
It did. You could tell that they have gotten much better at it over time.
Yeah, 10 years, right?
But I'd much rather see that than like de-aged Mark Hamill in some Luke Skywalker bullshit. They just like raising the dead with Tarkin and all that stuff. I'd much rather it's just like, hey, this is the same actor. He just has to look 20 years younger because of story purposes.
Right.
Whatever. That's fine with me.
How did you feel about Dedra Miro ending up in the Narkina
in
prison?
the Imperial prison? Oh, that's just so poetic, right?
Man,
the second you see the uniform, you're like, oh, the prison arc. I was half expecting them to show Andy Serkis like across from her or something
on program,
because the rumor was he was going to be in this season and he never showed up. So I wondered if that would be it, but no.
Too busy with his swimming lessons.
But I loved all the connective tissue. We get Mon Mothma's pixie cut. We get the girl from Dune, she's also in Rogue One. She plays what's her name in Dune, the doctor.
Dr. Kynes. Yeah.
Kynes, yeah. She was the person in Rogue One who was like, talking down Jin in the council thing. So they brought her back, and so they brought back Radis. Like you see General Radis.
I did exactly that. I Glup Shittoed so hard.
Yeah. There were quite a few Rogue One Glup Shitto moments, which is funny because Rogue One is a movie full of Glup Shitto moments.
Yeah.
It's funny when you rewatch that movie, and it's just like they cut away at the most ridiculous times for like just fan service moments. They're going through Jeddah, and it's like, oh, it's the guy from A New Hope who harasses Luke, and then like there's a shot on Yavin, and it's like, oh, here's 3PO and R2D2 for no reason, and then they disappear. It's just random.
Well, they have to make one joke about how they never get told where they're going.
Yeah, in the very beginning of that movie, Bail Organa just emerges from the shadows, and I can only imagine they're like, please clap. There's no story reason for him to be there. He just walks out, and it's Jimmy Smits.
So that was one thing that the way that they connected it in the show, there's no like applause breaks when you see a legacy character or whatever. Like it's all done with a purpose, and like you see Melshi at the end, and he's training all the guys that are on Scarif in the third act of Rogue One that all die, right? And it's like, oh, I know those guys, cool. But it's real fast. It moves on to the next thing, and that's, to me, that's fan service done in a very clean, palatable way.
Yeah, if you have not seen Rogue One, this would not distract you from the story. Right. It would just be a bunch of characters that you might remember or not, but they're just characters in the story. It's not trying to beat you over the head with it. And ultimately, it comes back around to the emotional moments, and that's what makes it work. The final shot is a very emotional story arc and moment, and it's not all about just how many characters from Rogue One we can shove into the movie or the show.
Yeah, it felt like a movie, though.
It did, yeah.
And I think I'll have to go back and rewatch season 2, but it feels like with every block, the color grade and everything starts to look more like Rogue One as it goes
I thought so too. I thought the look, these three looked a lot closer to Rogue One, and I don't know if they tried to match like the cameras that they used on Rogue One and maybe shot it slightly differently to try and match the Gareth Edwards style a little bit more in those final three. But I thought the same thing, and maybe it's just because everyone is wearing the same costumes and haircuts as Rogue One. But
could be,
yeah. But yeah, we get it's this one was about putting all the chess pieces in the right positions, like Saw's on Jeddah, and they also give you a little bit more reason for him to be so dismissive of Bodhi when he gets there, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
he's like, oh, all these rebel spies are coming to spy on
Yep.
me, and he's paranoid about the whole thing. And so he thinks it's just another reason for it, or another example of it. And uh, yeah,
Do you think
I
that Mon Mothma knows about Borgullet?
I would hope so.
Because he says that he bends them all to his will, and I'm like,
Yeah,
well, yeah, you have a
yeah,
giant brain sucking monster that
yeah,
nukes these people.
yeah.
What a weird little character. I love Rogue One. I know you are not hugely into
It's
Rogue One. Maybe
fine.
maybe you're better about it now than you were a couple of years ago. But
Yeah, and I think the one thing, having just watched the movie, that I will say is that when I watched the movie, I was just like, this should have just been a Cassian Andor movie,
mm,
because Jin is a whole bag of nothing. That character has nothing there.
that it is interesting because when you go back and watch Rogue One, you know Jin is very clearly the main protagonist of the
Correct.
story.
Yeah.
But now we have 24 episodes worth of Cassian Andor backstory,
Yeah.
and he's a supporting character in that film. It's a little bit interesting, but uh, I think it's worth all of the hours of TV that we got.
I would almost rather them like shoot a bunch of material that they could splice into the first couple acts of Rogue One that just like expands it a little bit more.
Hey, look, George Lucas historically has
He's
fucked
done
with his films
it.
over and over and over again. There would be nothing wrong if they made Rogue One the Gilroy cut and they added a bunch of stuff. I'd have no problem with it. I'd buy the Blu-ray and it would sit right next to the original one and it'd be great. So,
Yeah.
hey, director Krennic is an asshole, isn't he?
I loved that interrogation scene. There was a lot of channeling
Oh,
of the Dark Knight in this, I felt,
yes.
because they're blowing up a hospital. She's on
Hmm.
her Joker arc. But then you got that interrogation scene, which looked almost exactly like the Batman interrogating the Joker
Yep.
scene from the Dark Knight, where comes in behind her, almost shot for shot, like
Yeah.
that scene in the Dark Knight. And that I loved where he put his finger on her head and like
Right on
was
the crown.
turning
Yeah.
around.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was
He just
excellent.
kind of shoved her face away and he's like,
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll be fine without you. Like, the progression of Krennic from the first block of these episodes, where he's a little bit more of a showman and like seems like he's
yes,
a little more popular.
yep,
Now he's at the point where he's under Palpatine and Vader's thumb right now, and they are
yes,
putting the heat on him to get this Death Star up and running.
yep,
And you can see it. His hair is more gray. He's more
hmm,
direct. He's more to the point. He's nastier to people. Like all that stuff just adds so much context to
yeah.
where we get him
And
in Rogue One.
because in Rogue One we know that the Death Star has been delayed,
Hmm.
but we don't see the extent of all the shit he's had to go through to get this
Yes,
thing done, and the delay being the reason why the Death Star ultimately gets blown up
blown up.
is
Yeah.
they had enough time to figure it out. If he
Hmm.
finishes the Death Star a year earlier, Empire defeats the rebellion and there's
Yeah,
no issues.
dude,
But
I I would
Partagaz
love it.
has that line, right?
I need someone who's much smarter than I am to create a full list of all of the variables from this show that if they didn't happen
Yeah.
exactly how they happened,
Hmm.
A New Hope doesn't happen the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. And
Like
it's a long story. Yeah.
Dedra Miro, the most focused, determined, promotion motivated person in the entire empire is the leak that gets the Death Star information to the Rebel Alliance that kicks this whole thing in
Yep.
motion. Like, holy shit, man, it's so good.
It's just it's poetic, right? Because she was in her search for Axis, she was so obsessed with it that
Hmm.
she ended up getting a whole bunch of information that she shouldn't have, and
Yeah,
ultimately kept it in the same place, and somebody else found it and uncovered the problem. I love the line from Krennic where he's like, "If you're not a rebel spy, you've missed your calling."
yeah,
The one thing that she wanted to fight against was the thing that she was accused of and ultimately
hmm,
locked up for.
yeah. And they parallel a lot of that stuff. Like in these blocks of episodes, the rebels in the Empire are doing a lot of the same things. Like they're
Yeah.
jailing their own people. They're
Hmm.
constantly paranoid. They're interrogating and questioning people and having closed door conversations. Like, and it's one of those interesting things where when you're at war, there are no good guys, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's scared, everybody's acting irrationally, and to be able to see that from both the scrappy young team and also the well established empire was really neat, and it shines through that Tony Gilroy is a huge history fan.
Hmm.
Like all this war stuff, you can tell that he's like his bathroom on top of his toilet is probably like a stack of World War II books,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh
And
man,
I also want to call out one more thing, which is that
yeah,
force healer, the force
hmm
healer that he sees as he's about to leave, and that adds a little bit more of this setup for Rogue One. Is that now when we're viewing his character in the back of his mind, he's always thinking about that force healer and Bix,
yeah.
and how he's a messenger, and he's
Mhm.
destined for great things, and that's driving him, and it adds so much to his character and all of his plot arcs in Rogue One.
Dude, absolutely. And in the last block, he's very like, keep me away from that lady, right? And then in this
Hmm.
one, he gives her just like the little confident
Yeah,
nod as he's
he
walking away, and it's
understands,
like
right?
so much growth in. And I know it feels shorter than a year because it's only been a week, but
Hmm.
canonically, it's a year in between or whatever. So,
Yeah,
I could go on and on, man. The accolades are going to be never ending, and I can't wait to rewatch it at some
yeah.
point, and just soak it all in again. Uh, I'm not sure the final block had the same impact as the
No,
last one, but
no, and it was almost impossible to.
I think they knew, right? Like
Hmm.
the Gorman stuff is going to be so heavy. Um, let's let's add some humor. Let's do the K2 stuff, and then
So
let's do the slow, solemn march to the end.
what's interesting though is if you view it as a companion piece to Rogue One, specifically the last block does end on a bang, right? It ends on the biggest of bangs, which is the
Yeah,
Scarif fight.
yeah,
So all of this, you can kind of think of Rogue One as that second half of that block.
hmm yeah. No,
It's
you're right.
setting up for that movie rather than being its own little block, which
Yeah,
is kind of a prequel problem at some point. Like you can't truly end the story there because
right.
you have a direct ending elsewhere. But I think they set it up well enough. And now the prologue to Rogue One is that Luthen is ultimately the one that
hmm
discovers the Death Star,
Yeah,
and he sets everything into motion. And when you view it from that lens, I think that all of the story of Andor starts to fit into place.
yeah, yeah. I agree. And just like hearing you say the word Death Star, like when I heard them finally say it, it has so
Yeah.
much. It was like the Palpatine
Hmm.
thing in the prior block.
Yeah.
Like when they actually finally say the word, it means so
Hmm.
much more than if it was like. And I don't want to bag on them too much, but like in the Mandalorian, sometimes it's like, how many references can we fit into one episode?
Yeah.
And we can go,
Yeah.
yay, I like Star Wars, but like
Yeah.
when Dedra says Death Star to Krennic, it's just
Hmm.
like, oh my god, it's got so much weight
Yeah.
behind it.
It reminded me of Twilight. He's like, say it, vampire. It was like that, but Death Star.
Where
You didn't
no,
know
I
where I
mean,
was going with that, did you?
no, but now I do. I've seen that movie once, and I have no desire to ever see it again. But
Yes, it was revealed like the vampire word.
right. Uh, any other thoughts before we
My
take this
thoughts
one home?
are this is the last of Star Wars that I'll get excited for in a long time.
Yeah. Well, Dawn of the Jedi, right? Bo Willimon and
That's
James
true.
Mangold.
Yeah.
That's my hope. I hope that's going to be good. But I think it might be worth it for us to do a video, like a retrospective of the entire series
Yeah,
of
and
Andor.
maybe we do it in combination with Rogue One as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. I think that would be
You
good.
know,
But
how that fits into place now and how it's improved, how it still has faults, etc.
yeah, drop us a comment below if you want to see that video, and if you do, we'll make it because we have nothing but time on our hands. Uh, so yeah, that's it. Andor is done. Probably not going to see
Star
much
Wars is
Star Wars
done.
content from us
Yeah,
moving
nothing comes out
forward.
for a year.
But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Would love to hear all of your thoughts now that the show is over. Drop us a comment below and let us know what you thought. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. while you're clicking things, go ahead and like this video so it sends it out into the ether of the YouTube algorithm and more eyeballs can get on it. Make sure to check out our videos for the prior 3 blocks of Andor. We're also covering season 2 of The Last of Us, posted a review of Marvel's Thunderbolts recently, and we're going to be covering all the big movies in the summer movie season. So be on the lookout for all that and so much more. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video.